What are the skills required to be innovators in today's economy? It's not about what you can do with your hands or even with factories, but what you can do with your mind. This week's podcast is a recording of a live speech I gave recently titled Practical Innovation Skills. I've also included the audience Q&A at the end. Enjoy.
This is the Killer Innovations Podcast with Phil McKinney. Keep in mind that the information and opinions expressed in this podcast are Phil's, and Phil's alone, and they don't necessarily reflect those of his past, current, or future employers. Now, here's Phil McKinney.
Jim Vanitis from the HP Office of Global Social Innovation. Welcome all of you, and welcome to our webcast audience too. We're really glad to be able to bring you this special set of speakers tonight. Phil McKinney, who's he has many roles at HP. He's in charge of our innovation program office. He's a CTO for PSG. And Phil, maybe I just think of Phil as our innovation guru. He's got a great blog about killer innovations, and so he'll tell you more about what innovation's all about. So without further ado,
Wow, 6:15, and I'm in front of dinner. As Jim introduced me, I'm Phil McKinney. I'm the Vice President, Chief Technology Officer for the Personal Systems Group. The purpose of my talk today is to talk a little bit about innovation. What I want to share with you is really, at least my view and my opinion of the skills necessary to be innovators in today's economy. We are fundamentally seeing a shift in what is going to become the economic basis of the world. We think of today as really being an information and knowledge economy. What we are actually seeing is a fundamental shift to the creative economy. It's no longer about a society or a country's ability to build things with muscles and factories. Countries that are going to win are those that come up with the ideas, that come up with the innovations. So you are either going to be a creator or you're going to be a producer. And which side of that economic curve are you going to sit on? Now, it's interesting when I do these talks and I ask people about, do they think of themselves as being highly creative? And typically, you get a portion of the room that will raise their hand that says that I think of myself as being highly creative. But my belief is that creativity is not a gift of God. It's not a special thing that's just bestowed on a few people. Creativity and innovation is a skill. It's a skill that anybody can learn, no matter what their economic background is, what their educational background is, or where they live in the world. It's a skill you can learn, it's a skill you can practice, and a skill that you can become proficient at. So, here's my promise. 10, 20, 30. So what do I mean by 10, 20, 30? 10 slides, 20 minutes, nothing less than a 30-point font. Now, I am going to cheat a little bit in the fact that I typically don't go 20 minutes. That's probably the one number I will violate, but it is actually 10 slides, and I will go, and nothing will be less than 30-point font, particularly for me on the want to make sure I can see nice and big. But I'll probably go about 30 minutes, and I want to leave time for Q&A at the end. But what I'm going to share with you today is practical innovation. Not the theory and show you lots of whiz-bang technologies, but the practical side of innovation. And I'm also going to give you the secret sauce. The secret sauce that anybody can learn, anybody can practice. Now, I can't teach you everything about it in 30 minutes. And in fact, I'll probably ask Jim to bring me up I gave him one of the CDs, and I'm going to ask for it to come back so I can actually show it to people, so in case you want more information. But, so again, 10, 20, 30. So, the key behind innovation is setting the objectives, right? Now, a lot of us think about objectives, particularly in the educational field, of things like, No Child Left Behind, whether or not we all agree or don't agree to the program, how you measure the output, how you set the objectives for the classroom. But when you think about it, thank you very much. I'll talk about that. The issue of objectives is really the fact that we all have objectives that we deal with every day. We have objectives in our home lives. Buying a house. we have an objective of putting our kids through school. Just like we have objectives in our fun time of our life. In my case, I'd love to figure out how to lower my handicap in golf. It ain't going to happen. Because every time I think about that objective, I just have never been able to achieve that objective. But we set objectives every day. What you tend to find where people struggle is in setting poor objectives. Not spending enough time. They just see that, oh, I want to put my kids through school, but not sitting back and really thinking about what does that mean when you set that objective. It's not just saying the objective, oh, we're going to hit this revenue number, but being able to dissect that objective and communicate it literally to every employee. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an example of what the challenge is when setting objectives. We all think that we understand what objectives are, but you also have the challenge of if you set the objective the wrong way, you end up with an unintended consequence, right? And this is going to drive the camera guys crazy because they're following me, and now they're going to have to follow me onto a flip chart. Pick a subject area. We're going to talk about mobility of music. You think about what is fundamentally changed with the mobility of music, making music mobile. So you can think about it in areas of how mobile is it, and things about, or I'll actually make this ease of use. And think of this as kind of feature function. Now this is how we think about it from the standpoint of an HP within technology. So down here in the lower left-hand corner is the old Edison phonograph with the big Edison cylinder. That was a big breakthrough. You could actually take that cylinder from your house, take it to your neighbor's house, stick the cylinder on there, and you could actually listen to the song in a neighbor's house. Wow. Big breakthrough. First time you didn't have to have a whole symphony follow you from house to house. Right? Big step up. Right? Then we had LPs. Actual records. A little more durable, a little bit smaller, less fragile. You can take them with you. Right? And you can continue on up. You had, we had CDs, we had cassette tapes. Now we have MP3 players. There's one technology that's in here that as soon as you mention, everybody chuckles. 8-track tapes. Right? Now, for those old of us who remember 8-track tapes, when it first came out, it was the hot thing. It's the only technology that every car manufacturer within 24 months had it as an option on every vehicle they manufactured. I mean, look, it took, 8 years to get satellite radio available on just a handful of cars? Within 2 years, every car manufacturer hopped onto the 8-track radio bandwagon. Where's 8-track today? We all laugh about it because it came and it went. But what happened to it? Why did it not survive? The problem was when they set the objective was, I want to go from LP, I want to make something more portable. So the question was, make it more portable, right? So tape was coming around, you could figure out how to use tape. But when they implemented it, the question was, did they make it portable? Yes. But it had unintended consequences because it had a whole bunch of negatives around it. They didn't think through clearly defining what does it mean to make mobile music. All the things you have to think about, like, golly gee, what happens if you want to rewind it? 8-track, you couldn't rewind the tape. Also, if you never realized it, why are songs today kind of in that 2 to 3 minute range? Because you could fit 2 songs butted up next to each other on a single 8-track tape. And it forced the music industry to go to the 2.5 to 3 minute maximum song length. So we're actually living as a result of today of something that was a technology limitation when 8-track tape came out. So unintended consequences when you don't think about setting the proper objectives. And that's really what we're talking about here when we think about what are all the changes that have happened with mobile music. Today, now we're into the MP3s and we're into streaming. So, and here's the fallacy also of setting objectives. When 8-track tape was invented, and believe me, you know how hard it took for me to find photographs of 8-track tapes? There are not a lot of photographs, good photographs that are out there of 8-track tapes. I tried to go through my boxes to find my old 8-track tapes. My wife thought I was absolutely had lost it. But the problem also with 8-track tape was the fact that people stopped innovating. They thought they had the ultimate solution. They'd solved the problem of making mobile music. And this is where a lot of companies and a lot of organizations fail. You identify an objective, you figure out the innovation that's going to get you the answer to that objective, and then you stop. You think you've answered the question. You've stopped going forward. And so this is part of what's gone wrong, which is the fact of of stopping versus moving forward. And part of the objective for anybody in the form of innovation is you have a choice. You can get kind of into this objective blindfold. I've answered the question. Go away. I've got the perfect solution. And then anybody who's got something counter to your idea, you attack. Inside of an organization, we refer to that as the corporate antibodies. So anybody within an organization who's kind of that really crazy innovator, what I refer to as the innovation champion, these are the employees who show up, stand on my desk with their hair on fire. They're going to do whatever it takes to bring that idea forward. And everybody else in the organization views them as counter to kind of keeping the boat going the same direction. So anybody that's kind of in that fringe trying to come up with new ideas, they get attacked by the corporate antibodies. So this is kind of that objective blindfold. I've got the best answer. I've solved the problem. We're done. We're going forward versus constantly looking out for what's next. So one of the questions is we're at MP3 players today. We have streaming. What's next after streaming? And we're all probably sitting here going, wow, but that's the perfect answer, right? I don't have to have it. I don't have to have it on my device. It's the perfect answer. That's the exact same thinking the 8-track guys had. So how do you avoid having an 8-track experience of being the person who backed the 8-track and then got totally replaced by cassette tapes, totally replaced by CDs, totally replaced by the MP3 space? How do you not become the 8-track? The thing that when people mention it, everybody chuckles. And this is the challenge everybody has. And let's face it, the consumer, particularly in my case, the consumers are waving the white flag. There's also just too much. So how do you set the objectives to achieve what it is that people really want to achieve? Or how do you really deliver benefit to the space? So what's the solution? Solution is what I refer to as re-innovation. A lot of people may use the term as reinventing yourselves. So you want to go off and reinvent. Now, why am I a stickler for the word re-innovation versus the word reinvent? Invent is you come up with the idea. Innovation means you've executed the idea and you've had the impact. So it's not just about reinventing yourself. It's about reinventing yourself and then executing on that reinvention and go out there and re-innovate. So how do you re-innovate? Now, this is always one slide that typically gets a chuckle. Toilet paper roll. One of the biggest challenges we have, and I'm speaking to a room here that I'll actually probably take a step back because this might get a little bit of a reaction, is the fact is that when I look at new employees that I'm hiring out of the college and universities, the one skill that they do not have is creative thinking skills. They know how to answer a problem. If I give them an engineering challenge of designing a circuit that only uses so much power end to end and only interjects so much noise, they can design the circuit, right? But if I give them a problem that requires them to look at multiple possible answers, they freeze. What we've lost out of the kids today is that natural creative ability, the natural creative curiosity. So what does this picture mean? Think about the perfect example of all of us when we were the most creative. Now, those of us who are parents in the room, how many different ways have you seen your kids when they were little use an empty toilet paper roll to invent something? It's a periscope, it's a knife, it's a gun, it's a ball. They don't care. In their minds, it's whatever it is they imagine it to be. One of the reasons that works for them is that they haven't understood conformity. They don't realize that everybody else, all the parents in the room are looking at them kind of silly and thinks it's cute. But then as soon as we get into society, it's about conformity. It's about fitting in. This is the one thing that is one of the challenges for being able to really re-innovate is to unleash people's natural abilities. So how do we do this? Here's the secret sauce. Real simple. Fire plus Poe. So what does FIRE mean? FIRE is a 4-step process. The F stands for focus. Focus on creating the right objective. Understand the objectives that you're setting. So that requires focus. You've got to take the time to think about what's the real outcome that you're looking to have versus just hurry up and create a new product, or hurry up and raise test scores, or hurry up and get a higher amount of high school students going into college. Whatever the objective, think about what is that objective. So that's focus, FIRE. I, the ideation process. How do you come up with the ideas? One of the challenges in idea generation, right? We've all been in the process, right? Get 10 of your best and brightest friends, put them in a room, and we're going to have a brainstorming session. So out of the 10 people, someone's going to raise their hand and go, ooh, I'll be the scribe. I'll write the ideas down. Great. Get the flip chart. So you go through, assuming you've spent enough time setting the objective, you come up with a really set of great ideas, and someone goes, ooh, I'll type them up and I'll send them around. Then what happens? Nothing. Nothing ever comes out of the process. Somebody's got a drawer full of great ideas hidden somewhere, but nothing ever happens. Why? It's not just about the ability to generate the ideas, but it's about ranking the ideas. So the R part of FIRE is rank the ideas. At HP, now you can go through all kinds of really complex ranking processes. You would think we would have this very elaborate online system to do the ranking. You know how we rank? 5 questions. On any idea, you must be able to answer yes to the first 3. First question, does this idea fundamentally change the customer's experience or expectation? 2, does this idea fundamentally change HP's competitive positioning? Or 3, does this idea fundamentally change the economics of the industry? If I can't answer yes to one of the 3, why am I doing it? It's just a me too. Once I answer yes to one of those 3, I have to answer yes to the following 2. Both of them I have to be able to answer yes. Does HP have a contribution to make? The last question is, does this idea generate sufficient margin? Meaning, will HP get a return in exchange for the research that's going to take to bring this idea to market? But that's the last question. For each of those 5 questions, we do it on a score of 0 to 5. We use this as kind of a crowdsourcing. Any employee can participate in the voting mechanism. We have an online system called the HP Garage. It's amazing how good it is when you keep the ranking process transparent and very simple. And what we find is there's just a natural bubble effect. You get the really, really top ideas, and then you get the ideas below. So when we run a brainstorming session, we don't leave the brainstorming session until you do the ranking. You set 2 parts of the session. Here's the ideation, crank, 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 crank. Now stop, go through each of the ideas, and go through and do the ranking. So that when you leave the room, you know the top 2 ideas that the team has come up with. You sense a satisfaction that we actually have an output that somebody's going to look at and take action to it. E, the last portion, execution. Ideas without execution is a hobby. And I'm not in the hobby business, right? It all comes down to execution. Now at HP, we do a little bit of a unique process where we actually do what we call a gated funding model. But the same applies to whether you're planning your next vacation with your family. Focus, what's the objective of the vacation? Ideate, come up with some ideas. Rank where you're going to go on vacation. But it's not a vacation until you execute it, until you go on vacation. So the same thing happens here. We do it as a gated funding model. We give a little bit of money, try it out. If they get good response, give it a little bit more money, try it, get a response. And that's how we do the funding mechanisms when we're running the innovation pipeline. The last 2, PO. There's 2 fundamental skills that people need to learn and need to become proficient at. PO, perspective. The ability to change your perspective. We all tend to have blinders on through the process of growing up with our parents, going to school, being on the job. we get these blinders. We learn kind of certain rules of thumb that work. It's your ability to get rid of those blinders, which is going to determine long-term success. So, as an example, if I asked you, what is half of 13? So what's half of 13? 6.5, right? Well, you make an assumption of what I meant by 13 and what I meant by half, right? Could be 6 or 7. Could be 1 and 3, right? If I had spelled it out, it could be 13. If I rolled it out in Roman numerals, it's 11 and 2. Roman numerals horizontally, it's 8 and 8. Roman numeral 8, Roman numeral 8. This is part of the challenge that we have when we're hiring college graduates coming in, because they're taught when they're given a question that there's one answer. All of us that have been around the block a few times always know there's never one answer to the problem. Maybe one answer for the test, but there's no one answer to the problem that we live in the real world. And so the challenge here is getting people to stop thinking about what's the one answer and step back and look at all of what's the possible answers. What are all the possible ways of looking at this problem? Change your perspective and look at it from the broadest possible area. The last skill, observation. The ability to observe. Now, if I go back to the example of picking a vacation, we're going to go on vacation. Now, my kids are grown and gone. My wife and I are empty nesters. My 2 daughters are married. My son, who's the baby of the family, is a senior at Cal State Fullerton. He hates it when I refer to him as the baby of the family. So it's my wife and I planning our vacation, right? Observation. You throw the idea out. You look for the body language. Did the idea connect? Did I miss the mark? Right? And you pick it up by observing them. It's the same every day. Uncovering the unspoken needs and the unspoken wants. Because if you can satisfy the unspoken needs and the unspoken wants, whether it's a student, whether it's your spouse, or whether it's in the job, that's where the breakthroughs come in. So it's as simple as FIRE plus PO. Focus, ideation, ranking, execution. PO. Change your perspective and tune in your observation skills. If you can do that, that becomes really the fundamental skills for the innovation. So, again, FIRE plus PO is something that I've used for many years, even prior to my career. I actually was retired prior to coming to HP. I came out of retirement. This is the work that I was doing for many, many years around uncovering the psychology of creativity and the psychology of innovation. And when you break it down, the same process that we use at HP is the same process we inherently use when we're working on something as simple as planning the vacation with our family, or me trying to figure out how to reduce my handicap score in golf. It's nothing more complex than that. Now, what I've given you is really the basic fundamentals. But the reality is that I'm a firm believer, as I talked about in the beginning, about this change to the creative economy. Ideas are the new oil, the new diamonds, the new gold. It's no longer going to be about society's ability to create manufacturing plants and run a process of producing. The value that's going to get created, it gets created by those who can invent, who come up with the ideas. And we've got to be prepared, all of us career-wise. I mean, I look back to both my father and my father-in-law. I grew up in Chicago. My wife grew up in Gary, Indiana. Both of our fathers were involved in the steel industry going through the 60s and 70s. We all kind of know what that experience was with the transition from a manufacturing economy to an information knowledge economy, and watching my parents, my father and my father-in-law, struggle with that transition. This transition from an information knowledge economy to the creative economy will be just as disruptive. So it's not just about, in the case of the educational field, of preparing students, but it's also about all of us in our day-to-day jobs. How are we going to all be prepared to make that transition? If you want more information, I have a blog, a podcast. There's about 45,000 listeners to the podcast. You can get it on iTunes, Zoom, blah, 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 blah. And actually today, I actually gave this to Jim. This is Jim's copy. Amazon has a CD now out with 2 discs, which is basically the FIRE plus PO. It's a 2-hour piece. This is actually licensed under Creative Commons. I was fortunate the recipient of an early mentor right out of college by the name of Bob Davis, who was kind of the king in the software industry back in the 70s. And he spent a lot of time mentoring me because I was a hardcore propeller head geek deep down. And when I asked him how I could pay it back to him for the mentoring he gave me, the instructions were to pay it forward. So everything on the site, everything on the podcast, everything on the CD is licensed under Creative Commons. You just can't charge anybody for it, but you're free to use it and modify it and use it however you wish. It's all available for download. You can follow me on Twitter, and that's my HP email address if there's any follow-up questions that anybody might have. And with that, we're going to take some quick Q&A. So if you've got a question, raise your hand, because they're going to want to get you a microphone so that the people on the webcast can also hear. So, any questions?
Hi, I just had a question. I noticed in your ID generation there wasn't kind of a place to look at what's been done before. I feel like sometimes there's great ideas that people have executed and then they fall away because they didn't get scaled up. And so I was just curious about the role that would play.
Yeah, again, given I got 20 minutes, which I've now stretched to 35 minutes. The key on the ideation process is what you find the difference between a good idea and a great idea is not the idea, but the timing. And so the question comes down to is not whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, it's getting the timing right. And part of the work that we do at HP is being able to put those technologies on the shelf and knowing when to put them on the shelf. That's kind of hard to do to get management to know, wow, we got this really great product. And you're going, nope, not yet. Nope, not yet. Hold on, well, not yet. Now is the right timing. And that takes a lot of discipline. The other issue is being able to put those ideas up and then go back and cull through them. Ideas that didn't work 5 years ago may work now. And so for us, it's about having an idea management system. In our case, the HP Garage. So it's an online system. All the ideas get cataloged there. And then we actually have a team that goes back and looks through previous ideas to see if the timing is right or if something has changed in the marketplace. Next question.
Innovation is about having something new. But how about just improving something?
Innovation is not really defined by just being something new. Because let's face it, there really isn't ever anything new. When you really do a deep analytic analysis of innovations, they're always based on something before, right? So people go, oh, I can invent it. No. There's prior art. You're improving somebody else's idea to go do something. Now, you'll hear me use the term killer innovations because I'm a believer in what a definition of a killer innovation is an idea that's a fundamentally different way that problem's being solved today in a very unique approach that is fundamentally difficult for somebody else to copy. And for organizations and companies, that's important because that gives us competitive advantage. Now, you could also map killer innovations to breakthrough innovations. The other side of innovation is what we call incremental innovations. You've got an existing idea, you've got a unique approach to make it better, faster, cheaper. And then the key is that are you in the business of benefiting from that, or are you in the business of sharing that? So, for instance, in the case of the methodology, the Killer Innovations methodology, the podcast has been going on for 5+ years. There's like 130 shows, 90 hours of content. It's not about me benefiting personally from it. It's about me finding a better way to innovate and then giving it away for free and letting people share and learn. So that is, I wouldn't say that the methodology I've come up with is a breakthrough approach. It's an incremental improvement on how to innovate and then the decision to make that publicly available. And that's perfectly valid as innovation. Innovation does not always have to be breakthrough. You get huge benefits just from doing, incremental innovations. Right there.
Okay. Thank you. May you please differentiate for me between creativity and innovation? There seems to be a thin line between.
Well, think of creativity as also being matched to ingenuity. It's your own ability to create, to invent. So it's the skill of being able to take something vague and unclear and bring form to it in a unique way. Innovation is translating that into something tangible and believable. So creativity and ingenuity is your natural ability. Innovation is the process of translating that natural ability into something real, something that has impact on people's lives. Got questions up here in the front? Go ahead.
How has your thinking about innovation evolved over the years that you've been working on this? I mean, how long has Fire Plus Poe been the story that you've been telling, and when do you think it will change?
Well, Fire Plus Poe, the nice thing about it is you notice I didn't get into here's how you come up with ideas and here's the brainstorming approach. It's really about whatever it is. Fire Plus Poe is really the way to think about how do you structure the steps. So focus. What people tend to do is they jump into the ideation session right off the bat. Hurry up, get 10 smart people. Let's get a flip chart. Let's come up with some ideas. Versus, whoa, take a step back, bring focus, think about the objective, then go into the ideation process. And then with the step that's always missing is the ranking process. Nobody ever does the ranking process. And so it's like, think about it as like checklists. If you ever look at a checklist that a pilot goes through to take off, it's like 5 things. You think about everything a pilot's got to do to get a 747 off the ground, there's 5 things on the checklist. So think of Fire Plus Poe as the checklist. It's not going to tell you exactly how to do all that, albeit there's enough content in the podcast that if you want to understand how to run brainstorming sessions and how to do secondary rankings and how do you run gated funding models, it's all there. The key, though, is at the high level, is understanding the checklist. Before you jump into creating the ideas, have you taken a step back and have you brought focus? Have you stopped to think about what is the objective? So think of it as the checklist, not the how, but as a way to make sure that you're structuring it in the right way. Fire Plus Poe has been around for me. It's a process that I've been using for over 10 years, long before I even came to HP. And it stood up to the test of time. And in fact, now, there's literally thousands of corporations around the world and NGOs. And so for me, the structure works. The actual tactical pieces change because I would argue where a lot of people run into the problem is they'll take the HP process and they want to duplicate it. And I'll tell you right now, that won't work. I can't write down the process, give it to you in a book, and you take it back and be able to go step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. It doesn't work. You have to understand your organization, your culture, your people, what works, what doesn't work, and adapt it to your organization. No 2 organizations are the same. One more, because I promised you I'd let him guess one question. Go ahead.
Yeah, you said that we moved from manufacturing to information knowledge economy, and now we have to move to innovation economy.
Not that we moved there. We are moving there.
Moving there, yeah. Now, how do you compare investment into innovation activities versus investment into research and development activity?
Well, they're one, you can think of them as really as one and the same. But think about it from the standpoint of the economic value of corporations. So if you think back 20 years ago, and you looked at book value of corporations, right? The value of factories and machines and buildings and vans and trucks and those kinds of things. You'd find that 70% of the market cap was made up of book value. Now you look at corporations today, majority of the market cap value is determined by intangibles. And a lion's share of intangibles is research and development. It's innovation. The belief that the shareholders at that corporation is going to be able to continuously come up with new ideas. So the shareholders have already made the move. Otherwise, we'd be back to book value kind of market caps. You're seeing this huge explosion of intangibles. Now, the hard part is how do you measure the value from innovation, right? Is it the patent portfolio? Is it what's in the pipeline for research and development? Is it the process of being able to take an idea and really get it out on the street? So what's the value of that? And that becomes that's a whole different study. Today, Wall Street looks at it as R&D as a percentage of revenue is the metric that Wall Street uses. And it's actually a bogus metric. It's actually non-predictive of future success. HP, over the last 4 years, we've moved from an R&D as a percentage of revenue to R&D impact to gross margin. The theory being is if I do better R&D and deliver really unique innovations that matter, innovations that you care as a customer, then you will reward me with a margin premium because I've delivered something unique that solves a problem that you have. And so we actually incent, pay, compensate the VPs of R&D based on their ability to have impact on that gross margin. So for every dollar they spend, what is going to be the gross margin return from that product or idea that they're executing? And that's how we measure innovation inside of HP. Jim?
Great. Phil, thank you very
Thank you.
much for spending the time.
Thanks for listening to this week's podcast. To augment what you've just heard, we've produced a 2-disc, 2-hour CD called Creating Killer Innovations. The CD covers such topics as the management of innovation, the skills of innovation, and the killer innovation methodology. The CD is available on Amazon or at philmckinney.com. For feedback to today's show, please send an email to podcast@killerinnovations.com. For more information or to connect via Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, or to connect to the broader community of listeners to the podcast, visit philmckinney.com. Again, thanks for listening to today's podcast. I truly do appreciate the time out of your busy schedule, and we'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.